Good afternoon.
Welcome to the STEM Promise, Opportunities for Economic Empowerment, hosted by the Department of Energy and the YWCA National Capital Area. My name is Tamara Smith. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of YWCA National Capital Area, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today for our afternoon panel discussion and tweet out. I want to share a couple of statistics with you before we begin. Did you know 48% of the workforce is currently women? And women are currently only making 77 cents for every dollar a man makes. Women in STEM jobs, however, are beginning to close that gap. On average, they're making 33% more than women in other fields. But we need to do more to encourage more women into STEM occupations. STEM jobs are projected to grow significantly, 17% by the year 2018, and the YWCA, with many others, are working to increase the exposure and opportunities for women to do more and to get into the occupations and get on the STEM wavelength. I want to welcome our distinguished panelists. It's my job to introduce our moderator for the day, Mike Heideck from USA Channel 9. Mike is a morning anchor for the for the WUSA Channel 9 and the creator of Cool Schools. It's a weekly television segment highlighting amazing STEM activities in local schools. He's an advocate for improving schools and has been an anchor in many cities around the country. We are very lucky to have him. Please join me in welcoming.
Well, it's nice to see some familiar faces. I've seen some of you at other events, and I'm very honored to be a part of the STEM Promise Opportunity for Economic Empowerment. Again, I'm Mike Heideck. We have a distinguished panel. I want to give you an idea on how and why I ended up here. As she mentioned, Cool Schools is a large part of what I do at WUSA, and I find some of the most innovative things that are going on in schools, teachers that think outside of the box and do not let students fall asleep in class. They get them so excited, and they get them looking in the eye, and they get them out of their seats, and they get them doing things, and that gets them excited about STEM. And that includes young men and young women of all ages who might not normally even think of STEM or computer programming or engineering or science or math. So we find those people, and we try to put the sunshine light on them so everybody can see them and say, hey, I could do that too. And it goes everything from coding to building robots, to engineering a green solution for something. So we have a chance to showcase a lot of great things. And as you heard, just today, President Obama made an announcement that he's going to enact 2 executive orders to try to help the wage gap. And as we heard just now, instantly you can help that wage gap by choosing a STEM career. So that's why we have such a distinguished panel here today to tell you how they support STEM, how they do it themselves, and how they like to encourage other people to do it as well, because obviously it's a long time to make sure wages are even throughout the United States and elsewhere. So we are going to ask each one of the panelists to introduce themselves. I'll give you a little bit of their background, and I'll let them connect you to how they are involved in STEM. We also have one reminder for everybody in the room and the live audience. We are streaming this on Ustream, and the microphone is very, very sensitive. It's sensitive on person so we can hear the panelists easily, but it can also pick up your side conversations in here, so we don't want the audience on the other side of that computer to hear some of the side conversations that we tend to have in big events like this, so that's just a quick reminder. And also, all of you who are joining us on social media would like to try to give you, can somebody give me the hashtag that you prefer? I know there's a few.
STEM equal pay.
STEM equal pay. Hashtag STEM equal pay if you'd like to send questions in. We'll try to get some of your questions answered. And we also just want you to spread the word to all your friends who are in and around the STEM industry and careers in schools and businesses throughout the listening area here. Okay, so among our panelists, we have, let us start with, please, Florencia Spires.
Florencia Spires.
I tried.
Very close.
She is a D.C. native, 6th and 7th, 8th grade educator at Howard University Middle School by trade, also an Albert Einstein Fellow, placed at the National Science Foundation, undergraduate degree in biology. We also have Alice Madden. Alice, welcome. She's over there on viewer left, our stage right. Principal Deputy Secretary of Intergovernmental Affairs since August 2013. Started a career in Colorado in high tech, serving in Colorado House of Representatives, and encouraging and pleading with women to join STEM careers in outreach with the Department of Energy. We have Desiree Hoffman as well. Hi, Desiree. Advocacy and Partnership Director of YWCA USA, leads economic empowerment and racial justice policies here, a decade of legislative advocacy experience. And we would like each one of you to kind of tell people your connection to STEM careers. Florencia, let's start with you.
Well, my STEM career began a long time ago. I was a Peace Corps volunteer serving in Botswana, Southern Africa, as a science teacher. Thereafter, I stayed there 11 years total. I was a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years, 2 years a trainer for incoming Peace Corps volunteers, and then I remained there in the bush. I returned home to get further education, which was at Loyola University in Maryland, and obtained a degree in my master's degree in curriculum and instruction in science education K-12. And then I actually continued with a fellowship with NASA, and I got my STEM leadership certification with NASA in 2013, June 2013, and then I became an Einstein Fellow, which is current at the National Science Foundation. I do a lot of outreach work with children in the community. Even though I'm at the National Science Foundation, I work in a local library and actually do a project called GPM, so I'm a NASA master teacher as well, and I do that outreach work with students in the community in order to stay connected with children in the community. And this actual satellite was launched on February 27th. I was with NASA scientists and engineers as one of 5 master teachers, and we are actually having that satellite orbit the Earth right now, about 450 miles above the Earth, and it is collecting data, precipitation data. And so what we're trying to do is actually get a lot of resources on the ground in order to validate the data that we're going to be collecting from that particular satellite. So I'm in a lot of different areas, but definitely totally committed to STEM education and making sure that I reach children who are young and in groups that are underrepresented to ensure that they have some exposures to STEM education.
So when you start to hear these descriptions, jot down your questions, because I know some of you are interested in some of the things that she just had to say, so make sure you can send them to us on Twitter, and then, of course, anybody here, please raise your hand, and we'll start doing the questions momentarily. Desiree Hoffman, let's go to you.
Sure. So my name is Desiree Hoffman. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Policy at the YWCA USA. We are based in D.C. We're so happy to be here at the National Capital Area. The National Capital Area is one of our affiliates, one of our local associations, who delivers critical services in their communities every day. The National Capital Area is like many of our associations. They really tailor their programs and services to the unique needs of the community. They have a program here called Empower Girls, and that teaches young girls STEM skills. We also have a variety of other programs in different cities and communities across the country. YWCA Pittsburgh, for example, YWCA Lake County in Illinois. I wanted to share a little bit about the Pittsburgh program. They have an after-school curriculum dedicated that is tailored for specific communities. They focus on reaching young girls and young boys who are from high poverty backgrounds, disabled kids, young girls of color, to reach their full potential in STEM careers, because we know how valuable they are in addressing the wage gap and racial wage gap as well. In terms of advocacy, as you mentioned, today the President signed 2 executive orders, is going to be signing 2 executive orders. One is around federal contractors and making sure they disclose wage and racial disparities in employment. Also, that you can no longer retaliate if you disclose what your salary is. That's a big deal. And on advocacy front, we advocate for policies that are dedicated to our mission of empowering women and eliminating racism. And a lot of the economic policies that we support include raising the federal minimum wage. If you haven't received an update on that lately, believe it or not, we haven't seen an increase in the minimum wage for some time. And unless Congress acts, it will remain stagnant. The other issue that we're working on is the Paycheck Fairness Act, to make sure that women, there's equality in wages. So that it should be on the Senate floor sometime this week. And in terms of STEM, we're part of Million Women Mentors to make sure that we fill the pipeline of mentors. We're mentoring young women in this profession, in these fields. And so we come at it from a direct service approach, an advocacy approach, and also, did I say direct service? Direct service and advocacy approach. And so we're just so happy to be here today to talk through this.
And Ms. Madden?
Thank you all for having me here. Thank you, Mike, and to my sister panelists. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for being here on a gorgeous, gorgeous afternoon. I have had a varied career, over 30 years. I'm sort of the poster child of someone who's worried that they don't know what they want to do with themselves, what color their parachute is. I think I'm on my 7th color parachute. I started my career in high tech. And that was, believe me, an all-male world. I once had to follow a man into a men's room to get him to sign on a change order because he was trying to hide from me. And I thought, well, I'll show him. I did knock to make sure no one else was in there besides him. I practiced law in Denver at a great firm and a very progressive and equally accepting firm across the board. But when I got pregnant, the second phrase after congratulations was, well, you know you're no longer on the partnership track, right? So it was just a different time then. And I have had 2 stints in academia, and I can tell you in academics and across the board, I don't know if any of you have heard this NPR story that's been on just the last couple of days on American University's channel, that men ask for raises, women do not. Men will ask for a larger bonus, and that'll actually end up hurting women, because if a woman doesn't ask for it, you know, that man will take part of that bonus pool, and maybe they were both going to get even, but he asked, she didn't. So women really have to start empowering themselves. I ran for office, and oddly enough, I still think that is an amazing place for women. For one, your pay is set by statute, so all the pay is equal. But I think women's skill sets, and frankly, I don't generalize very much about why women are better at one thing than the other, but I think when you're leading a team of people, I became the majority leader in the State House of Colorado, you really have to care about that team and the caucus as a whole, and put aside maybe your own, the needs of yourself for a while for the needs of the whole, and you end up certainly fulfilling your own needs. But I think that worked well for me anyway, and we've seen other women rise very high in politics. Of course, not quite yet to that building down the street. Maybe in a couple of years we'll see that change over there too. But I think one thing that I have seen over the years is women be very timid promoting themselves, particularly in politics. I myself hated promoting myself when I was running for office. I hated raising money for myself. But you know what? I was able to raise millions of dollars for other people. I had no problem raising money for other people, other causes. But when it came to myself, instead of saying $1,000, it'd be like $150, really whatever you can do. I mean, I found myself backpedaling and diminishing. And I realized that I'm not doing anyone a service there. I'm not even letting the person who wants to write a check, I'm giving them, letting them fulfill the destiny they'd like. You just have to be confident enough to ask. While I was in office, I started working in energy, sustainability, and I had to rely on experts. I'm not a scientist, but I had policy advisors who were. And it's really interesting, for those of you who work in STEM and those of you who work in policy, you need to be able to speak all languages. It's more and more important. There's something called multidisciplinary or cross-cutting efforts around education, because our climate scientists, when they don't do a good job in front of a reporter, well, we've seen kind of what's happened. So we need to know how to talk to the press. We need to know how to talk to the general public. So when I talk to scientists, I need to think about how does that translate into a policy that might help the broader citizenry, can't speak today, of my community or even the United States. Environmental literacy you touched on in programs in schools, the cool schools, I just think that's fantastic. We've learned that when you have programs in schools like that, you can reach at-risk kids, the kind of kids who maybe don't have an easy time sitting in a chair listening, but when you get them out doing applied science, suddenly they're improving their critical thinking skills, typically girls who might be told, oh, you're not going to be good, you're not going to be good in science, and they're geared into English or something like that. Suddenly they're out there doing it, getting their hands dirty, and building that confidence they need to carry on. I also worked for Governor Ritter as his climate change specialist, and that was an incredibly male-dominated world, talking to those scientists. And again, getting them to speak in language that I could understand and frankly translate to the press, that was something that was really difficult. And when I worked with women scientists, they sort of just had a general broader view of how the world worked and not so myopic. And it was almost easier to work with researchers who just had a broader life experience and not so much tied to the lab. And again, I don't like to generalize men are better at this, women are better at that, but it was so fascinating to me that the policies advisors that I dealt with that were women in the sciences were actually more effective because they just had a better way of communicating. So there is such great potential for women in these fields, whether you want to be in a lab, whether you want to work for a politician, whether you want to be a teacher. And the gap, we heard already, it's 92 cents to the dollar. Not quite good enough, but in the STEM fields, that gap is much, much smaller. So these are very worthwhile positions. There's a projected shortage. So when you talk to your colleagues, your parents, your friends about your career path, you can know that you have a job waiting for you. Baby boomers are still retiring. We have professionals transitioning, retraining themselves. This is a field that's really ripe.
If you've ever had a chance to read literature on a nonprofit called Change the Equation, they actually take some of those figures and they put them where the rubber meets the road, just how many jobs are going to be needed in such a short period of time. So the fact that there are so many jobs and there are not enough people to fill them is such a huge gap that women can walk right into instantaneously if they choose the career. One of the things I think in my time at schools is when you talk to certain kids, it doesn't matter if it's a young lady or a young boy, they say STEM. Gee whiz, that just must be crunching numbers on a calculator. It can't be as fun as building a rocket or creating the capsule that saved somebody from a mine shaft that collapsed or something that can get you into outer space. I think oftentimes there's a narrow view of students, ladies, of what STEM careers actually hold. And if you each could address, we start with you, some of the broad perspectives you've seen in STEM careers.
So that's what's really imperative, is to actually allow students the opportunity to make connections with building a rocket. So there are scientists, there are engineers that are doing those jobs. Depending on where the rocket is going to actually settle, there's other work that needs to be understood in terms of what its role is going to be. So there's mathematicians that are involved. There's climatology that's involved. So there are so many jobs that are related to science, technology, engineering, and math that are really important for students to understand. But what's really important is that students get experiences when they are young. When they're young, and I mean as early as they can start manipulating toys and exposing them to different kinds of toys that allow them to actually have joy for them instead of them actually being pigeonholed into a type of toy. Because we know that girls oftentimes are given dolls, but give them a doll, give them some Lego blocks, let them play with the blocks, let them build. And as they mature, we need to definitely have teachers that are also experienced in the STEM field so that they can actually have them do project-based learning, hands-on learning, in order to learn how to manipulate and learn how fun it can be to make applications to real-world examples in the STEM fields.
And speaking of applications, how many of you have either sons or daughters or nieces or nephews in attendance here that are, say, I don't know, maybe 10, 12, 16 years old? Raise your hand who have those. How good are they with a handheld device? How quickly can they manipulate that? Well, some of the great things that are going on in classrooms right now, and these ladies will attest to this, is you're teaching kids how to build apps for those phones. So I've done stories where young ladies and young gentlemen have created an app to try to save something in their community, whether it's the environment. So it's community conscious, but it's also STEM related, and it's something they're so well versed in by natural ability. That's one entry point where you could probably get kids interested in STEM education. It doesn't have to be a rocket. It doesn't have to be something that's a different kind of chemistry. It could be something that applies to them right now in their teenage years, which I think is a challenge. I don't know if you've been able to see that with some of the people at YWCA.
Well, I always relate it back to my own personal life. I grew up in a very working class community in central Pennsylvania. I'm one of the first individuals in my family to go to college. I didn't major in a STEM career. I did major in international relations. But I just talked to a friend this weekend who I grew up with in my neighborhood, and her daughter is a young, vibrant Latina who wants to pursue a career in the field of medicine. And I was talking to her about what motivated her to get into STEM and how she has blossomed. She said her mom, number one, her mom has told her, even though she didn't go to college, she supported her in anything that she did. Her junior ROTC instructor told her, "You're really good at math and science. You really should consider it." And then she told me that she wanted to bridge the world of caring and making people smile and her love and her skill sets in science. She did experience and does experience discrimination and prejudice. She still hears in her community, "You're going to be a deadbeat like your father." And I think that a lot of young girls, especially young women of color, have those messages playing in their heads. So I see it as a multi-pronged approach where direct service providers like the YWCA National Capital Area, advocates like myself, and then mentors who are men and women, especially some of my panelists, can really bring and encourage and inspire women who are just, young women and men who are just oozing with, energy to get into these fields. And so that's really where I see things going, and there's different entry points.
And Ms. Madden, I was going to jump off on something you said a little while back. You had to chase somebody into a men's room to get them to sign a purchase order. You've been up against some of those difficult things when you're the only woman in the room, the only woman in the company perhaps. You would be the perfect mentor for somebody. Why is mentorship so important? Because you've gone through some of those hurdles.
That's a great segue. There's studies that have shown that women and minority students that are in STEM, in college, so they've already made that choice to major, they will change majors more than others. So white males will stay in those majors and graduate. Women and minorities will change majors, maybe to history, maybe to English. And so that was documented, and people really wanted to figure out why. And there's a ongoing perception that they're not being supported in their majors, they're not being supported by their teachers or the department heads. That's something that that's a solid thing that we can address. And I actually have, well, I'm off of them now that I'm at the Department of Energy, but I have 2 National Science Foundation grants with a great group of colleagues. And our goals were to get more women and minorities to study STEM and sustainability in the United States, and another one was women in developing countries. And it was all around building mentorships and networking. Oftentimes people are so worried about doing their good job, they don't take the time it takes to make sure you're on LinkedIn, make sure you're going to association meetings. Maybe that means you leave at 5 to go meet someone at 5:30, or think, oh, well, I need to work till 7:30. Making those choices to make sure you're actually taking care of yourself, your mental health, your physical health. You don't hear that a lot in this town. Take care of yourself. But if you don't, you won't be worth your weight at your job either. So think about your career path. Be a little selfish and take the time to develop those mentorships. I think people have gotten away from mentorships, and my personal theory, totally unbacked, is that now you can ask Google. You don't have to ask those stupid questions to people that you might have a few years ago. But have a friend, have a colleague that you can ask those questions, who can also sort of not get you out of your everyday and start helping you think about your bigger picture, where you're going to be in 5 years. We don't have the luxury to do that all the time, so try to build some relationships with people who have that in mind for you, and they'll keep reminding you to step back and look at the big picture sometime.
So I'd like to add that I agree with you totally, and I think it's really important that women or young girls actually see other women in the same fields that they're interested in, but also see people who look like them in the field. That is really imperative, because if they don't see themselves in that profession, then it's going to be really hard to imagine themselves in that position. So that's really important to keep in mind. Also, the navigation process, being able to know how, when they get in the older ages and getting ready to go from one level to another, even as far as when you think about middle school to high school, if they know that they have a knack for science and math, then they need to be seeking opportunities in a math or science school that's going to enhance those abilities. Because studies actually indicate that students actually know what their area of interest is in the 7th grade. So some even earlier, but if we just take a general account of 7th grade, then we can actually direct them in those areas in order to allow them to grow in those areas so that they are moving in the direction of interest. And then, as I say to students, then that becomes your job, and that's actually fun for you, and you don't even consider it as a job. So those mentors are really important, and then helping students to navigate to try and find out the resources that are available, because that's what holds a lot of kids back from actually the next step. I know a student right now who's not at the university, but they definitely should be one of those at one of the universities because the kid is clever, quite clever. But if they don't know how to navigate and they don't have people in place in order to help them, then it's almost an impossible feat for them to actually make it there.
Nowadays, as we see studies on sociology and demographics, more and more people are waiting longer and longer to get married, which means the young women that are in school now may stay in school longer to get advanced degrees. They may spend more time in the workforce. What are some of the things, as say you're some of the people in attendance here or some of the people who are watching online, are close to the end of at least their undergraduate career, how do you go ahead and take the next step? If you're going to make sure that your career is going to be your focus for the next maybe 10 to 15 years after school, if you haven't necessarily had that mentor, how do you go about finding one?
I would encourage you to first, if you're in an institution, if you're privileged enough and lucky enough to be able to attend college, using your alumni network is one of the primary ways that you can really build your skills and make connections. They can also help you figure out different programs or trainings that may be available to you or fellowships that may be relevant to you. So I tap your existing alumni network. The communities that I really often, I think that are often left out of this conversation, but luckily the YWCAs across the country help lift and empower women and eliminate racism, are communities of color and communities that have high levels of poverty. And so that's a bit trickier and it's more complex, and it requires some coordination between different service providers. Also requires teachers to be identifying kids that have potential. So I think that is a whole nother community that we need to be we are thinking about, but requires some different systems to be in place to make sure that they're entering STEM. Because at the end of the day, we want them to be in careers that have career ladders, that pay well, that they can pay for, have a family sustaining wage.
Mm-hmm.
Say they aren't minimum wage earners, so they have a career path, so they have good benefits. So they enter into the middle and upper classes of our society, and we are following what the president says: when women succeed, America succeeds. And so those are the kinds of things that I envision.
Ms. Byers, you seem like you're ready to go. You got something.
Well, it's interesting because I was discouraged when I was in high school by a male counselor. So you've got to also kind of know about yourself, and as you grow up, learn about your strengths, learn about your own learning, and also follow that dream. Follow that dream and don't let anyone discourage you. I think that a lot of girls are discouraged along the way, but if in your mind you've got that tenacity, that perseverance, and that drive to actually be all you can be, that's also important. So I'm saying that it has to be internal as well. So we also have that role to encourage girls, and everybody should be doing it. It would be great if every home had a mom and dad there, and it would be great if neighbors were also talking to kids like they used to do in the past. But we've got to probably increase that so that we are touching more kids' lives and encouraging them to be all that they can be in life.
Ms. Madden, we've been talking mostly on a global level. Let's bring it down a little bit more closer to where the rubber meets the road each day. You've had jobs in different industries, STEM-related, some not STEM-related. Say I'm a young woman who is in college getting ready. I've got my STEM degree, maybe even my STEM advanced degree, and I'm getting ready to get into the workforce. And my first and foremost goal is to have a house for myself. Say I want my condo. I get out of school, what kind of wages can I expect to learn, and how do I start saving for the very first big event in my life? Whether it's just that first new car, whether it's a house or a condominium, or a great vacation every year. Those are real things that people can grasp to say, if I do X, Y, and Z, I can achieve that. So when you get out, what are some of the wage levels you can expect?
It really depends arena by arena.
Yeah.
These careers, as we mentioned before, tend to pay more. I think federal government wages are going to be fairly established. You can know by what level you are entering. You can know what your career path would be and plan accordingly for your savings. Other areas you can do the research. If you're in engineering, you can see what
the pay scales are.
Yeah, what the pay scales are. So it really requires a little bit of research in what you're working on. But I'd say and you might end up choosing something different. If you see that a pay scale is not going to be as high as you think it might, and perhaps research on one thing, then maybe you want to go into the private sector and do something else. And I think it's okay to maintain that flexibility. Oftentimes, people think they have this set path. So some door opens and they're afraid to even look down it because they think that's just going to get me off track. Well, some of the most exciting things happen, down those doors. So I think be willing to, use your discretion. And if it looks like this is something you love, but it's not going to pay very well, maybe you can get a better paying job and do that as your hobby or your volunteer. I've melded volunteer passions with jobs that I've hated. Litigation. And actually hating litigation is what drove me into politics, if you can believe that. So, you're not always going to get your wish list. So sometimes you bring that passion in elsewhere, but having that volunteer position on your resume might help you get your dream job later. So I think just some planning and patience and willingness to take a few risks is really worthwhile.
Anyone would like to add to that, or can I?
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I wanted to remind everyone that today is Equal Pay Day. So we should all be celebrating in some ways, in some ways not, because women still earn 77 cents for every dollar that a man earns. And we know that this is even it's even worse for women of color. So African American women only earn 64 cents for every dollar a white man earns, and Latinas earn half of what white men earn. And so, we often talk about this in the policy world. Why is that? And many times the work that women do is undervalued and underpaid. And this largely has to do with occupational segregation. Women are relegated to professions still that are considered pink collar. And if you're a feminist economist, which I don't know if any of you are, some argue that women who end up in these jobs, it's not that they are worth any less, it's just they're valued, and the economics behind them, because they're in the field of caring, they earn significantly less. STEM offers a wide range of opportunities for young women. The wage gap doesn't totally disappear with STEM careers, but it's much narrower than in other professions. And so I think the planning aspect, really sitting down, I can't even remember myself at the age of 18 saying, all right, Desiree, sit down and plan for your career. This is what you could potentially earn here and potentially earn there. I don't ever remember a conversation like that happening with my mom or teachers.
So it's time we need to start having these conversations,
it really
right? Maybe
is.
the adults need to get into the room and say, look, these are the numbers. Let's look at them together.
At the end of the day, I'd like to see STEM jobs and these female-dominated occupations wages rise as well. But right now we're talking about STEM, and it is a perfect opportunity for the young women in the room to really explore and do some good planning.
And I think it's also important to, I said it a little bit earlier, but to make those applications. When I think about a new technology that's out there today, the 3D modeling, and I don't know if any of you have seen it, but there's a video clip that shows that there was a heart that was created using 3D modeling in order to create this heart for, I think it was an 18-month-old child who had a heart defect. And by the doctor actually being able to manipulate the heart, they were able to go in to perform surgery, and that child is alive. And there were very slim chances of that child surviving. So make those connections to a caring way. That is related to STEM. then the girls can also get motivated by that, because if that's what we want to do, is care about others, there's nothing wrong with that, but we've got to make the connection so that they can expand their view in terms of connecting into STEM.
I'm glad you brought up Equal Pay Day before, because I wanted to mention the executive order that was actually signed today by the president. It's part of closing this gap, and it bars federal contractors from retaliating against employees who discuss their pay with each other. Well, knowledge is power. I was a civil rights attorney, and if someone's suing over sex discrimination or racial discrimination, and the employer can hide that pay scale, that's a big disadvantage to someone to learn the truth. So sharing the information, sometimes women, and Lily Ledbetter, she had no idea that she was paid less. It was an accident that she found out. So transparency is power, and we need to remember that it's okay to empower ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. I think women are often faced with this false choice. They worry about being liked versus standing up for themselves. Well, you can really do both.
So one way I think also is to equip women is that when you're actually going to seek a job or employment, to do the research before going there, to actually know the plateau. Know it for the particular job that you're seeking, also knowing it for the region that you're going to seek that employment, because it changes from urban area to urban areas, from rural area to rural area, to ensure that you're actually empowered. So when you're having the discussion, negotiations about what your worth is, that you're going with something in mind and not just kind of taking whatever is being offered to you. So being able to empower yourself through your own research is really important for women to do.
Some of the things that we're starting to see now slowly are women heading up major companies, including tech companies. Marissa Mayer of Yahoo is one that comes to mind right away. Leadership at Facebook, same corporations like that. General Motors now, even our own company of Connect is headed up by a woman, Gracia Mattore. So do those people hold specific examples for people maybe in their teens, or do you think that's too high of a plateau to sort of look for? Is it realistic to try to inspire people at the level of maybe junior high school and high school, or should they try to find somebody sort of closer as their center inspiration?
Perfect. I think that it's really important for girls to actually see those women in those positions. So we need to get their faces on publications and television more so that the girls see them, and again, they can see themselves in those positions. I'm actually working with the Computer Science Directorate in the National Science Foundation, and so these women who are learning how to actually code, because we're expanding computer science in 10,000 schools and training 10,000 teachers to teach students across the nation in computer science. And so when they learn coding, when they're younger, then they actually have that sense that they can actually contribute in a way. Again, making those connections with those women who are in those positions who are doing great things for our nation.
I think it's incredibly important. I was just thinking in terms of an experience I had when I went back to the law school to teach. Some women, young women in the Women's Law Caucus were complaining that there was this hall of portraits of, as they call it, the old white men. And when I talked to our dean, who he's self-described old white man, about it, and I said, I love old white men. I'm married to one. But it doesn't mean we just have to be surrounded by them. So we changed our award system. The awards that the law school gave were for lifetime achievement. Well, who's been practicing law for 50, 60 years? Old white men.
Right.
And so we started having a Rising Star Award, a Diversity of Practice Award, a private sector, a public sector. Without saying this is about men or women or minorities, we completely changed the look of both the alumni board, because we created some membership requirements around that, and we changed the entire award system. So within 3 to 6 months, the entire thing was changed. And it didn't rub anyone, it didn't make a lot of waves, in a few ways. But it really was a quick change. So again, the best advice I ever got from a colleague when I was at the legislature, well, 2 things. First of all, he said, don't be on the health committee, don't be on the education committee, because those are the women's committees, which I would never have thought of. So I didn't do that. And he said, don't wait for someone to invite you to the table, pull up a chair. So isn't that great?
Well said.
So just pull up a chair and make yourself useful and go to work.
So-
If you see something that you need to address.
Address it, right. Ms. Hoffman, how does the YWCA, when it comes to pulling up a chair, you try to encourage people within the community to say, you know what, step forward. You know, we can help nurture your emotional stability. We can help nurture where you need to reach out and find other mentors. I mean, how does the YWCA, can be a jumping off point for women who are right outside the front door here?
Well, I look at it from different angles. So, talking about representation, we're in the nation's capital, and women are still severely underrepresented in Congress. We're also underrepresented in cabinet-level positions. But back to what you were saying is not only is there a lack of racial and gender diversity in these high-level positions, but we also want to make sure that women and women of color are represented in the various fields, not just HHS or Department of Education, but they are at they're Secretaries of State, and that they're at the Department of Energy. And so that's something that we frequently talk about at the YWCA. There's just a lot of work, much more work to be done in terms of making sure, because if you're seeing an image every day and it's not what you're used to in your community, you might have that record playing in your head, well, that person doesn't look like me. I'm probably just going to stay where I'm at for the rest of my life and cut hair. Not that there's anything wrong with cutting hair, but if you were given all the tools and your confidence would be built up, you can only imagine what that kid's response may be. It may be much different, saying if they had role models and images that were different every day. And so I think it's very important, all the images that we see all the time, because they do stay in your head and prevent you or encourage you to be something else.
We see there's been a lot of studies, and some of them have been in the news recently, about how men may have those quasi kind of relationships where we conduct business on the golf course. Or there are the after 5 business meetings that everybody goes out and have drinks and sort of talks business. Are there organizations that exist like that are either solely for women or largely populated by women that maybe not enough people know about? Maybe there are organizations that are to fraternize about STEM education or STEM careers that women could seek out and say, look, I can find a partnership, I can find a mentor, I can find some advice to someone who sort of walked the walk. Are there places, a few things that we can give people who are watching and listening today to say, hey, Google this organization because this is going to be really terrific to at least get your first foot in the door, so to speak. Any ideas as you guys?
Million Women Mentors.
Okay.
I would encourage you to go online and look at their website. That's one area that I would encourage you to look at.
I would also encourage that women formulate their own groups. Like we have a responsibility. We actually know the information, so we're talking about empowerment again. So we can empower ourselves from the community and actually band together and support girls in STEM, support each other as professionals, and as the young women are growing into professionals. We have that task to do. It's a community responsibility.
But can I get back to one thing he said? I think it's really important. The backdoor conversations, the fraternizing, what women may or may not have access to. I think that takes place in every profession. I don't think we can escape it anywhere. And we have to work with men who are in positions of power to acknowledge and be aware when these things are happening and how they may exclude women. And what mechanisms can they put in place to make sure that they are not ousting women in any way, shape, or form. That's still, I think, apparent in almost every field that we're in. I don't know if there's research out there that says otherwise. So I did want to say that.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it's a very important conversation.
And that's what's good about the conversation, because one of the things that comes to mind is a lot of, we've done a lot of stories year in and year out, and it almost seems like an annual story now in the news, and all news organizations do it. There's a group on the Hill, all women, and they always get together several times a year for dinner and fraternization, and it's just the women. Republican, Democrat, Independent, they still do that. My questioning was, do we have some of those things in the STEM fields? And if not, maybe it's time to start creating some. So if you're one of only 2 women in your whole organization, you can find other women in another organization who are up against some of the maybe social, hurdles that other women have to go through. You can sort of support each other and say, hey, you can make it through this, I did, that kind of thing.
I really like a couple of things you all said about, making your own organization if one doesn't exist. But I'd also strongly suggest joining, co-ed groups too, your professional organization, because I think it's important to have, maybe that organization that's about women where maybe you're more comfortable asking questions and getting that support that, you really need that's unique. And then also kind of a broader professional development with, whatever organization it is that's just open to a broader group of people, because otherwise you might miss out on opportunities to be part of some backroom discussion or help drive how the discussion even happens.
Does anybody in the audience have any questions? We're talking amongst ourselves up here so far. Sorry about that. It's just so interesting. Yes, ma'am.
I'm on Twitter, so we have a question from Twitter from someone called the Academic Cafe. It's for the entire panel. What has been your personal experience with the wage gap in STEM field, and what is the right way to go about addressing this issue?
I would say that I have had the awareness to actually empower myself. And I do the research. I made that recommendation is because I do the research to ensure that I'm getting what I'm worth and will be happy with what I'm being paid. So I go back to that to really emphasize that it's really important to actually do your homework, to do the research in order to find out what the wage is or what the pay is for that particular profession in that particular area to ensure that you're not being shortchanged. Know the plateau.
I think that's really key to know the boundaries. When I mentioned that I was working in the law field when I had my kids, and I negotiated my pay after that. I was the first woman to have a baby there, and I was certainly the first woman to negotiate anything with the partners. And when they got their jaws back up after me coming in and saying this, I gave them 2 options, and they picked one, and we went on our way. But that was so hard for me to do. I was terrified. Believe me, it was not easy. I was sweating bullets. And even to this day, not this job, but a previous job, having to say, I need this much, and that's it. And I was lucky enough to know, not everyone can do that, but I knew I could call the bluff if there was going to be less. Okay, there was a little wiggle room, but I could walk away if I needed to. I knew what I wanted. I knew what my bottom line is, and women often don't do that for themselves.
Yeah.
Even this NPR story today, I think you guys should podcast it, talking about how women, they lower their demands even before their sentence is finished. So there's really ways you can practice to make sure that you're not downgrading yourself.
We are, I believe, entering a new phase in American workplace politics. I'm seeing that we're starting to talk more and more about work-family-friendly policies, whether it's paid leave or paid sick days or benefits. But I have to say, I think there's still a lot of room to grow in this area and improve, because women still are the primary caregivers in their families. When more and more women now are also the sole and primary breadwinners in their family, in addition to having the bulk of the caring responsibilities, caring for elder parents or their children. And so all of that plays a role in the workplace as well, because you want to go to work and be efficient every day. You want to produce, but at the same time, you also have all these other responsibilities. And you don't want to look bad in front of your employer, but at the same time, you've worked hard. You have earned these things. And so negotiation is very important in terms of upfront negotiation when you're entering a new career, and then also while you're in the career negotiating and setting those conversations up with your employer and saying, hey, I'd like to do a performance review. And I would like that to potentially lead to more training. I'd like that to potentially lead to more benefits or flexibility. Really knowing ahead of time in advance what your goals are, and having a real honest heart-to-heart conversation with hopefully a professional boss who's rational, who understands that conversation. And that's a whole other conversation in itself, because we know what it's like when we don't have employers who are not there and don't get it. And that's another panel for another day.
We all know people in our lives, men, women, who've been in STEM careers. We've come across them in our jobs. We know people who are good at math and science. The goal, I guess, to get more and more people involved in this line of work is to connect with the people who aren't necessarily interested in it right away. How much would you say, and I've seen this in covering some of the stories that I've covered, that the language you choose as a mentor, how important is that? Because, as we all know, and I'm speaking to the teachers in this room too, we all tend to talk in acronyms and jargon. And when a young woman or a young man is thinking about a STEM career and you come at them with the word STEM, for example, and they've never heard it before, they're either going to say, you know what, I'm a little too shy to even ask what STEM is. So you've already lost the battle at that point. If they're all of a sudden too shy or intimidated by terminology, they're not coming to you most likely. So is that, do you think, a jumping off point to try to get kids interested who are ripe for a new career path maybe in 5th and 6th grade, or an idea of something to do as they progress? How much do you think the actual way we speak to young people about these careers is important?
I think it's really important, but I think what's more important is actually allowing students to actually have the experiences with STEM, because you can dissuade those preconceptions of what STEM actually means by the fun and the learning that they actually have with the STEM subject areas. So it's really important to start them when they're young, continue it, which means that we've got to have a workforce that's prepared to have it actually occur year after year. They can't skip a year or skip 2 years because they don't have a teacher who's equipped to actually teach STEM education or subject areas that are related to STEM that's going to allow them to do hands-on activities and project-based learning in order to get those experiences and understand that they actually enjoy it. So it's not the language, it's them having the experience, and then they start beginning to actually speak the language because they love it, but they never knew that they would have loved it.
Sort of sneaks up on them.
Exactly, and that's really important, and you got to sneak it in.
Some of the things that I have little kids, I have a 7-year-old right now, and one of the things he loves is Lego robotics.
Yeah.
And he's always had an aptitude for science naturally, but it was more animal and natural sciences. And we steered him towards the Lego robotics, and he can't get enough of that stuff now. He's just so maybe that's an example of get their hands on things and get them doing things that are STEM related, and maybe the jargon will just sort of fall in their laps after a while.
Here's another one. When they had CS Ed Week late last year, I did outreach in the community library, and so the kids were doing coding. So code.org actually has a wonderful program where you can learn computer science 101. When I had my 1.5-2 hour segment with the students were saying, Ms. Byers, are we going to come back and do this again? So they were excited, but none of them had actually been engaged with the computer science program from code.org in their schools. And this was at the end of the week. So again, it was all laid out for teachers to actually just turn on the computers, and of course that's another issue whether or not the resources are there, but to actually allow the students some access to the programming, and then students can actually learn that they actually enjoy it, have a knack for it, and there's a component of the code.org format where you can actually look in and see the coding that you're doing, the Java that you're doing, so that they can actually reverse it. Instead of playing the game, they can actually do the coding, do the coding first, write the coding, and then input that information in order for the game to work. So it can be a higher level as well in terms of the playing the game and having the exposure for that particular program.
Okay.
I'll just put a plug in for a group I sort of mentioned before, Association for Environmental Educators. It's a group of nationally across the country of teachers, people in public and private sector, all interested in K-12 education. But it's, again, getting kids outside generally or doing applied science across the STEM studies. And it can reach kids who, might not even graduate from high school. We did some, I 3 of my master's students study this because we'd heard anecdotally, if that's a word, that students were doing better on their standardized tests. They were more engaged in science, and actually students who had high dropout potential were finishing high school and going on into college. So we started documenting that, and now there's studies across the country that have shown that these types of programs work, but it's teacher by teacher, principal by principal. This organization provides curriculum so you can drop it in and hopefully work with the standards in your state, because we put so much of this on our teachers, who of course don't have the luxury of a lot of time. So Association of Environmental Educators, if you're interested.
I just wanted to see if there's more questions from the audience.
Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Actually, I didn't have a question, but I'm with Pepco, the utility company, and we just purchased the University of Maryland watershed house. If you remember, a couple of years ago on the mall, there's this international program where all the schools and all the universities compete and build these energy efficiency houses, etc. One of which, the whole idea is to bring STEM to the masses. And University of Maryland won the international competition. As a result of that, and after much discussion, Pepco purchased the house. And it's very interesting, this is very timely, because we just launched it and put it up at our Rockville Service Center, and it opened last week. We'll be opening it up to the public on Earth Day. And one of the things that I've been talking to Tamara about is actually providing an opportunity for some of our young girls to come and look at what science hands-on looks like. Because I said if I had learned science that way, I probably would have gone into it. But because of the way it was taught, it never really appealed to me. But if I had seen it in motion the way I've seen the watershed house, I think I would have done a lot better. So what I would say is that we are going to open it up to young people, not just girls, and we're going to have tours and programs to allow them to come in to see what science in action really looks like.
Sounds like a cool
Wonderful.
school story for WUSA. Josh.
So there's a report called Why So Few Women in STEM by the AAUW, and it talks about how the little things we say in our homes have a dramatic impact on women actually going into STEM. Like girls, I guess in 3rd and 4th grade, 70% of them raise their hand, I love math, I love science, and then by the end of middle school, the number drops off dramatically. So I was kind of just curious if you could address, and then maybe just by a show of hands, like who's ever had a female or a role model or a woman in their life say, I'm no good at math, and how that trickles through the crowd, and it trickles through it. So, as parents, and what the report says is that we can't say that in front of young learners because they look up to the women in the room, and I'm a father of 2 young women and 2 young girls, and have you had that experience, or how do we address this really pernicious effect of the idea that women aren't good at math and how it affects us in our educational system and achievement of STEM?
I think you make a really good point. And the reason why I say that is because the girls that I've taught in my career, so many of them actually go into the STEM field. And they come back and they share that with me. And so I believe they've been inspired because many of them, I know that I teach from a project-based type of approach, project-based learning. And I think the children enjoy it. But if they haven't gotten it before and they don't get it afterwards, it takes something away from that ability to get better at it. So I believe that the role models that we mentioned earlier are really important, but it's really important to give them those experiences so that they remain positive about being in the STEM fields and pursuing them.
I just wanted to highlight a few other things at Department of Energy that we have going on, going back to the question about images and women in energy. So we have a series called Women at Energy. If you go to energy.gov, that highlights women that are working in the energy field. So Department of Energy has from scientists to project managers to statisticians, mathematicians, and that series in particular highlights women and the work that they're doing. We also have a newer initiative called the Minorities in Energy Initiative, where we have at least 20 ambassadors across the United States who are out talking about STEM jobs and energy. And I'm surprised Josh didn't say this, but the way that we interact with from P to 20 kind of grades is through energy literacy and doing hands-on workshops with both teachers and nonprofits and organizations to get kids kind of inspired about STEM. So if you're interested in that, check out energy literacy and energy.gov.
Will do. Good call.
And there's a number of internships.
Yes.
I have a whole list. I didn't get to all my talking points, so I'm glad you did what I should have done earlier. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Perhaps this is very basic and it's well understood by many, but is there a single resource that is a good place to start to get a broad sense of STEM? You've got energy, you've got, aerospace. I mean, when it gets into the very specific disciplines, I mean, I can see people,
A little bit overwhelmed.
clouding.
Yeah.
So is there a place, a resource that gives you a fairly basic review or introduction to, the whole notion of STEM that would be helpful to, to start young girls or young people in general?
One way I think to start, when you think about the community level, is from the home. Like, I think it's really important that we maximize, particularly in this area, the museums that are there. There's so many museums that actually have STEM activities embedded in their programs. But I think that the different organizations have such a copious quantity of resources. Like when I think of NASA.gov and the project I was talking about, they go K through 12. And almost any topic that is related to space exploration, it is there. But you can get it on the strands of which the children are learning. And some of them you can actually implement at home, so home activities. So when we think about energy, when we think about the program PEPCO, almost every one of them, Washington Gas, they all have a site. So depending on what the child is interested in, like I spoke about earlier, when you find the knack for that child, or I think it's even important to expose them across the board. Let them have experiences across the board so that they figure out that, that's not my forte, but this is. And so that they have experiences. It's almost like with sports, because we do understand, a lot of men take their children, their boys out, and they play sports across the board, and then they finally find out what they're interested in. So we want to do that with STEM fields as well, to ensure that they know all that there is to be offered, and then allow them to show that spark that that's what their forte is.
And sometimes the places you already go have STEM, you just don't look through them through that lens.
Exactly.
If you go to, and there's a fabulous new resource at Smithsonian Natural History, if you guys haven't heard about it or been there yet, it's called Curious.
Yeah, curious.
It's amazing, and it's all about QR codes, and they have 6,000 artifacts that kids can touch, and they can look up, and they can do further research, and it's brand new, and it's fantastic. So some of the things and one of the things that I would say as a parent that can be paramount is when you walk through the museum, if you open your own eyes as a parent and look at the people who are working there. When you go to natural history, look at the scientists that are inside that fishbowl of a lab. There are women in there. There are young people in there. There are all different colors of the rainbow in there. But if you as a parent are just going, I'm going to schlep past the Tyrannosaurus Rex one more time because you've been there 100 times, we have to sort of look at things in a different way ourselves. If you look at it through that lens, it is in every subject. If your son or daughter loves fashion, there's a STEM component to fashion. If they love music, there's a STEM component to that. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be earth science. It could be raising money. It could be raising money for Habitat for Humanity. Create an app for Habitat for Humanity. I mean, there's a STEM version of everything we do. And I think if we look at things differently, that's going to make a huge impact. And it's just going to shift the perspective of your son or daughter, I think.
Absolutely.
My opinion.
I agree. Don't forget the kitchen. Take them in the
Right.
in the kitchen and help you cook and
And they're a perfect example. There's a go to cool schools on WUSA. There is for the kitchen and chemistry, right? There is a sort of a highfalutin restaurant in DC, and if I could remember the name of it, I would let you know. But I'll think of it and I'll get back to you. But basically, it's one of those restaurants that you can't even find it. It's only foodies know where it is. Well, the guy who runs it does it all with science, all of it. Everything he does dry ice experiments to help create a certain kind of food. He does all of this really cool stuff, and it's really a delicate palate sort of place. And you just pay one price, and it's a prefixed menu. So if you're a foodie, you totally dig it. But it's all in front of you, too. They do the science experiments on the food to set the food up in front of you. So, I mean, there are places just even going out to eat. STEM is involved as long as you sort of look at it from a different lens. So I wish I could remember
Rogue
that.
24.
What's that?
Rogue 24.
Bam, that's it. And I did a cool schools there because we took middle school kids there and they showed them how dry ice can make ice cream in a second, which also happens with NASA. All of those things happen. Rogue 24 is the name of it. Thank you. Look that up.
Foodie here.
Yeah. Yep.
Mike, we have Julie from Million Women Mentors here, and so I think she'll just kind of wrap up. I know we're a little after 4.
Okay.
So
I get going and I don't stop, so it's good to do.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
So I'm delighted to be here, and Julie Cantor with STEM Connector. And I guess just a little bit of a story is STEM Connector was built to really be a one-stop shop for STEM information and resources for the country. So we started by profiling 6,600 entities, what they're doing around STEM education and careers. And we started building a membership base of really top corporations in America, and then Department of Energy came in, and Department of Defense, and higher education institutions. Everyone rallied around what are the best practices, what can we build in that pipeline and pathway of what we say is K through J, kindergarten through jobs. So we started, we did a publication, and it's free, it's out there, it's available as a free download. It's 100 Women Leaders in STEM. And during this publication and talking to these extraordinary women from all sectors, they shared with us that they were often the only woman in their computer science degree, the only or one of 2 in their physics lab, or one of, just a few, and some of the alienation. They also shared with us that when it came to mentoring, that their mentors were often male mentors. And so we decided, talking and then starting to look at some of the statistics, which you've heard, the 92 cents on a dollar, the wage gap of 92 cents on a dollar for STEM careers versus 77 cents versus 64 cents. And we also learned when it came to computer science, while girls are comprising about 67% of undergraduate degrees, we're getting 11% of the computer science degrees. And 50% of us are dropping out of STEM careers after college. So we saw an incredible need for mentoring. And a very wonderful woman, Karen Peterson, president of the National Girls Collaborative, said to the wonderful Edie Frazier of STEM Connector, hey, look, we've got 8.3 million girls in 39 states, and 80% of our sites are looking for mentors. And Edie said, well, we can bring the corporate side in. You have the girls. We have the corporations. Let's start Million Women Mentors. And this was an idea about 10 months ago. Let's start Million Women Mentors. So we said, okay, well, let's bring on 10 partners. And let's talk to National Girls Collaborative. And these relationships were built over 3 decades with a lot of the women's movement and the girl organizations and the leadership, National Center for Women in Information Technology and AAUW and First Robotics and Girls Inc. and Girl Scouts and National 4-H council, and we started reaching out and ended up launching January 8th with 54 partners that reach over 25 million girls and young women. And then the U.S. senators said, we want to talk about this. We are behind women and girls in STEM, or as U.S. Congresswoman Tammy Duckworth said, China does not discourage their daughters in STEM. So we launched Million Women Mentors, and we asked corporate America, and we asked the United States government, and we asked organizations and nonprofits to put a stake in the ground of committing at least 20 hours, 2 hours a month, to mentoring a young woman with a focus on, I'll say middle school, through jobs, through early jobs, in STEM skills. And since January 8th, 54,000 people or entities have signed up. And what's been amazing is we've had about 100 phone calls with ERG groups. We're talking with the U.S. Department of Defense, and they're planning how do we scale mentoring with the Army, the Navy, the academies, to do mentoring for young women in STEM skills and all the cybersecurity jobs that are out there. And how do we even go through the process of coming up with what our pledge is going to be? ADP asking, should we commit a percentage of our entire workforce to mentor girls and young women in STEM? Accenture doing campaigns, Cisco doing campaigns where their employees sign up on their own, but then they're going to mobilize and incentivize those that do sign up. So 54,000 pledges in the first 10 weeks to mentor young women in STEM. But then a lot of the engineers said, great, I get my mentee, which we're not going to match you. We'll match you to the nonprofits and the 54 partners. We're not doing the one-on-one mentor matching. However, MentorNet, who's a partner, does that. And National Mentoring Partnership has incredible portals to do that. And NPower has incredible resources to match education institutions and nonprofits to corporate mentors. They're all partners. And so but what's been, so many said, well, what do we do? What do we do? So with 6 of our partners, including the Association for Science Technology Centers, which are an association of all the science museums in the country and globally, they have 98 million visitors a day. ASTC and Girl Scouts and Mentor and MentorNet helped us build a 20-hour mentor action guide. And then we work with Tata Consultancy Services to build phase 1 of a web portal, and now we're moving into phase 2. So if you go to millionwomenmentors.org, you can get, it's just a free download, the 20-hour mentor action guide, and we'll be customizing it for Department of Defense use for younger girls. But you can also get hot off the press white papers on girls in STEM and women in STEM and the facts and the stats and key information and data points. You can see the 54 partners, including the YWCA. We're working very closely with Dara Hiron, who's wonderful, and nationally, and then we'll work locally with the affiliates to send mentors your way, people that want to do STEM mentoring. I spoke to Enterprising Women, and there's about 1 million women entrepreneurs, and many of them want a mentor. And one of the things that I want to, I guess, leave with is don't wait. Don't wait for a seat at the table to mentor. Pull up a chair is a great analogy. We're encouraging women to just imagine over the last 3 months, especially all the your friends who asked you to meet with their daughters, all the young women that you didn't hire when you were doing job interviews, but you saw something in them, the young women at your church or synagogue that came up to you. And sometimes it can be intimidating, asking a woman in a position of power to sit down with you or to give you guidance on education and career. We're asking you to take the challenge this month to go invite that young woman for a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, or a soda, to go meet with them. And we're asking that you really think about who are those young women that have been asking for help all along. Do you need a utopian website to do an eHarmony match and say, here's your mentee, it's perfect? Or can it just start? Like, how many people in this room need a mentor? How many of these people are looking for a STEM mentor? Raise your hands really high.
Everyone needs a mentor.
Yeah, we all do. What area specifically are you looking for mentoring in?
Technology and communications.
To do what? Like, to what end? What are you interested in?
I work for nonprofits, so I'm interested in where communications and technology work together for social activism. Sounds specific, but it's surprisingly hard to find other people, especially women, who are just as into this.
Where technology and activism cross. And what about you?
Well, in advocacy for women and girls. And I have a lot of that at the YWCA, like I'm sure many of you do in this room, but it's always something we're looking for.
So any ideas for mentors for these two? I mean, we can talk to you about technology and activism coming together, building the Million Women Mentors portal. So come on over to my office, and we will have coffee. I've been 20 for them. Definitely bringing technology and activism together. And there are companies like New Signature in Washington, D.C. that do cloud and are a very hot tech company, and they do technology for a tremendous amount of nonprofits. And the leader is Chris Hurt. Sorry, it's a guy, but he's awesome. I can connect you with him. Others looking for a mentor. Others looking for a mentor. Okay. So check out Million Women Mentors. Also, if you're a college student or no college students looking for mentors, check out mentornet.org. If people are looking for role models in STEM, definitely check out leanin.org. National Girls Collaborative has Fab Femmes of role models in STEM. I think it's FABFEMS.org.
Fab Femme.
Fab Femme. No S. Fab Femme. And I'll just leave you with a quick story. So my 11-year-old daughter, we moved from D.C. to get her over the border, and we didn't even sell our house, and we had to downsize and rent an apartment and leave our house to get her into another school this year. And we arrive at the school, and the guidance counselor looks at her report card and her grades and says, well, you know, you look like you're pretty advanced in history and stuff, so we're going to put you in the advanced world studies, and you're pretty good at math, we're going to put you in advanced math. And my daughter goes, no, I'm not good at math. And she goes, okay, then don't worry. And I'm sitting here at STEM Connector, fuming. And then she comes back and she goes, Mommy, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at science. And so I'm sitting here working at STEM Connector, and my daughter's telling me she hates math and science. What do I do? So a couple of things were very interesting. We took her to Thomas Edison's lab, his summer lab in Florida, Fort Myers. And there was a woman who was taking everyone around on the tour, and my daughter asked her about 75 questions in 30 minutes. She was blown away by Thomas Edison's lab. And then I bought, after meeting the CEO a couple times, of Goldie Blocks. I know she's 11 and they're for 9-year-olds, but I just bought a Goldie Blocks box. And you have to build things. It's engineering, and you have to build things, and it's focused on girls 4 to 9. And I just put it out, and my daughter was like frothing at the mouth. Is this for me? Is this for me? Mommy, let's build. She didn't want to go out that night. She wanted to build. So it showed me the applied aspects that we have to, if STEM, find STEM in the classroom, but find it also in the informal learning space. Some women I know trying to engage their daughters in STEM have recommended learning how to code at Khan Academy. And I will share with you, I met a young woman in the Girl Scouts who codes. And I asked her if she would, she's 15 or 14, she taught herself to code. And I asked her if she would be my mentor and come and meet with me and teach me how to code. And so we actually were going back and forth on email to schedule the appointment. So there's also an opportunity for young women who are looking for mentors to look at their skill set, how much they have to offer in this sort of version of reverse mentoring. So anyway, I just want to thank Anne-Marie for having me and this wonderful panel. I really learned a lot from all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's it. Thanks, guys. That's perfect.
Mike, thank you, good job.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Our honorary
I can be really